Hey Chris, hey everybody, this is Ira Heidman, aka Will the Wizard Master, and you are watching Behind the Reel, A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3. And whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of Behind the Reel, and as you can see, I'm feeling beautiful and bad. And with it just having its 37th anniversary, we are going to be taking a look at 1987's A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors, often regarded as one of the best installments in the franchise and showcasing Freddy Krueger's transformation into full-blown pop culture icon. Now, Dream Warriors originally started out with New Line Cinema going back to Wes Craven to pen a script, which he did with his writing partner, Bruce Wagner. Though Craven was prepping to shoot Deadly Friend, himself and Wagner turned in a draft of the script that takes a massive detour from what we ultimately see on screen, being much more darker, twisted, and even at one stage, Freddy dropping the old cheeky C-bomb and threats of pooping on the corpse of Kincaid. Jesus, dude. It wasn't until director Chuck Russell and his writing partner Frank Darabont, who went on to do a few more lesser-known, low-budget films, came along and penned a script that injected a sense of teen camaraderie, and all taking place at Weston Hill's psychiatric hospital. Being a first-time and inexperienced director, Chuck Russell was apparently an absolute taskmaster on the set, even at one point actress Heather Langenkamp stepping in and speaking up to Russell in regards to how he was treating the cast and crew in true Nancy form. Elm Street 3 is not only regarded as a fan favorite, but is also famous for its music video by the glam rock band Dokken, titled Dream Warriors. I still remember downloading the music video back in the day, and it was just pixels, and this was back in 1999. Fuck, it was badass. And what's funny, the teaser trailer for this film not only features the glove from part 1/2, but a still of Freddy from part 2, but it also credits Craven and Wagner as the writers. Now, Elm Street 3 is also famous for having some amazing camcorder behind the scenes footage, including a makeupless Robert Englund in full Freddy costume, beer in hand, on set. On your Robbo. The film kicks off with a snooty Edgar Allan Poe quote, swiftly followed by what looks like one of those custom collectible videos you'd see on that wanker Cosplay Chris's YouTube channel. We're introduced to Kristen Parker, played by a young Patricia Arquette in her first role, and she's busy making what ends up being the 1428 Elm Street house. She starts nodding off before giving herself a nice boost to that good old caffeine and blasting some Dokken before her mum comes in and plays party pooper. She tucks Kristen into bed before she tends to her date, who I can only assume has the most glorious yuppie mullet to ever exist. Kristen drifts off and is greeted by a life-size replica of her creation, accompanied by some creepy jump rope kids. She follows one of the creepy kids down into the basement where they have a furnace face-to-face before declaring, "Freddy's home." Kristen grabs the little creep and legs it, with a Mr. Krueger chasing after them. The two find themselves stuck as a crispy Krueger gets closer and closer. Kristen finally frees herself as Krugs takes a swipe, leading to a room full of hanging victims. Now, fun fact, one of the stunt performers almost died in this scene, as the harness that was suspending them failed, resulting in them literally hanging from the rafters. Kristen looks down to see that her new friend has turned into a fried Scully baby. So this puppet you see right here was a last-minute kit bash job from one of the prop builders. Originally, effects wizard Mark Shostrom was tasked in sculpting the original puppet. Now, director Chuck Russell's direction was, and I quote, "Think Auschwitz." And upon completion of the gaunt-looking puppet, the crew decided it was way too disturbing to roll film on. So they had one of the prop guys quickly glue together a prop skeleton with some wispy hair, and that's what we see on film. Kristen wakes up in a sweat and goes to the bathroom before she's greeted by one of those Bluetooth smart faucets that also projects a crispy man on the mirror. The mirror murderer takes a swipe at our heroine as Mama Bear comes in, finding Kristen with freshly slit wrists. We then cut to Weston Hill's psychiatric hospital, where there must be a glitch in the Matrix as we see Morpheus himself walking the corridors. Although in this instance, he's credited as Larry Fishman. On ya, Lazar. We're also introduced to Bill Maher's stunt double, Dr. Neil Gordon, played by Craig Wasson, along with Taryn, played by Jennifer Rubin, a recovering drug addict. We also have Jennifer, played by Penelope Sudrow, a smoker who wants to get her break in TV, and trust me, she'll get it. We've got Philip, a suicidal puppeteer played by Bradley Gregg. We also meet Roland Kincaid, played by Ken Sagos, the muscle of the group, but in real life is the biggest sweetheart. can vouch. Dr. Gordon is then paged upstairs to find a panic-stricken Kristen who ends up slicing Morpheus's arm whilst kicking Dr. Gordon in his blue and red pills. Kristen starts chanting the famous jump rope song before she's conveniently cut off by Nancy fucking Thompson. One thing I've always loved about Elm Street 3 is how cohesive it is with the first film, regardless of what happened in Elm Street 2. Dream Warriors demonstrates care with the continuity of its story and characters, and if anything, expands what Craven started in 1984. So we find Nancy now as... just appreciate how 80s these two are. Bless you both. Nancy is now an intern psychologist, clearly as a result of the events that took place 3 years ago, resulting in the death of her mother and now a strained relationship with her father. Ms. Thompson,
you can call me Nancy,
drops her purse and Dr. Gordon spots a drug called Hypnosil. As he says goodbye to our legacy character, he has a good old-fashioned staring contest with a creepy nun who won't at all play a pivotal role later on in our story. Later that day, Lazar gives Nancy the grand tour and we're reintroduced to the meat sacks Philip and Kincaid. We also see Joey, played by Rodney Eastman, a mute with a teardrop near his eye, and I have no idea what the hell that meant in the first place. Joey plays naughty nurse before he's cock-blocked by old mate. Back at Kristen's house where this setting needs some smooth 80s jazz, Nancy's collecting some of her patient's belongings when she spots something extremely familiar. Oh, no big deal, just a scaled down model of her old fucking house. Later that night, Dr. Gordon is researching Hypnosil on his state-of-the-art heat generator. We see that Hypnosil is indeed a suppressant of dreams, which explains why Nancy has been able to avoid Freddy for all these years. This room looks like it would just smell like cigarettes and Reader's Digest. Kristen, having withdrawals of her crafty creation, dozes off and is greeted by a billyless tricycle accompanied with blood trails. Kristen then finds herself back at the 1428 Elm Street house, coming face to face with a spoiled pig. Now this prop you see right here, that's an actual spoiled pig. Production did not have enough money in the budget to construct a replica pig puppet, so they went to the butcher's, grabbed a full pig carcass, let it spoil in the sun, and then some poor crew member stuck their hand up there and puppeted it. Yummy! Ms. Parker is then attacked by a giant Freddy penis, snake. So Elm Street 3 marked the return of makeup artist Kevin Yeager, who not only did the Freddy Krueger makeup, but also constructed the giant Freddy snake. But upon delivering said prop to director Chuck Russell, he exclaimed, "It looks like a giant fleshy penis!" The set painters quickly scrambled to paint the giant phallic prop with slime green accents to hide the fleshy penile appearance. And all of the eating shots were filmed in reverse, so in real time the snake is being pulled off from Patricia Arquette. We cut to Nancy, who is pulled into Kristen's dream where she serves up a bit of eye for an eye justice before she realizes who the penis perpetrator is.
oh my god.
The pair ale-bay out of the dream when we see Nancy quiz Kristen the next day about how she knows about her old house, as well as her ability to pull people into her dreams. Kristen explains it was something that she inherited from her late father. Later that day, Bill Maher is giving a talk about some political bullshit, group therapy. To round out this group of crazy kids, we have Will, a jumper survivor. Along with Will, the cast here are top notch. You buy into their chemistry, but at the same time, their differences, their quirks, it's what makes them all tick. In this group session, it's clear that the teens are suffering from nightmares featuring the same psycho Sandman. But once again, the adults and guardians are fucking useless in the process. Nancy, however, knows what's up. She's been there, done that, and realizes that she's the only one that can help these kids, even if their dick kills them.
Great, now it's my dick that's killing me.
Later that night, Morpheus comes in to break things up on the Nebuchadnezzar and sends Will, Taryn, and Joey straight to bed. Not before Joey stays up, keeping a lookout if anything goes belly up with the rest of his crazy crew. We cut across to town where Nancy and Neil are chowing down at the local Thai joint in Springwood. Now, 100% this place has not updated their decor since the 80s because their food is that damn good. Hashtag lunch special with a can of drink. Nancy goes on to tell Neil that her mother died in her sleep a few years ago, whilst her father is out of the picture. The conversation turns to Nancy hinting that the kids at Weston Hills could use a Hypnosil hit, and Dr. Gordon shuts her right down, and Miss Thompson,
You can call me Nancy,
cracks the shits. Meanwhile, back at Weston Hills, we see the start of what is, in my opinion, my second favorite kill in the entire Elm Street franchise. One of Philip's puppet creations morphs into a familiar dream demon, slicing its strings and morphing into final form Frederick Charles Krueger. This time sporting a brand new glove, unlike the original that was used in the first two films. Now, this time around, the Part 3 glove was constructed by effects crew member Scott Nesselrode, and even at one point he used the original prop as reference to build the Part 3 hero glove. Kruegs then slices Philip's wrists and ankles open, moving his main arteries and puppeteering him like one of his creations. The concept of this sequence is so genius. This is cruel Freddy at his finest, and although as an audience we can see what's going on, the rest of the crew only see Philip sleepwalking. At one point slipping past the nurse until Joey spots a wild Philip up on the rooftop, alerting the nurse and the rest of the crew. This shot right here, as simple as it is, it's fucking haunting. Philip, now at the mercy of a cloud Kruegs, eventually has his puppet vein sliced, causing him to fall to the ground, killing him and making it look like a self-inflicted fall. The next day in group, the kids are now convinced that whatever they're dreaming about is out to kill them in their sleep, with Dr. Sims ordering evening sedation for everyone. Kincaid doesn't take kindly to Sims's orders and gives us some constructive feedback.
Fuck you! You sit down!
Dr. Gordon then proposes to Dr. Sims that if they're going to sedate the kids, then do it with Hypnosol. Dr. Sims, being adverse to the suggestion, accepts, but at Neil's responsibility. I feel like this is something Bob Shaye said to Chuck Russell before filming.
I hope you know what you're getting us into.
Later that night, Jennifer is staying up watching telly. She's then interrupted by Keanu-less Morpheus telling her lights out. Jennifer persuades Max to let her stay up. She tries the old Siggy Burn trick to help her stay awake, but it's useless. She falls asleep to the Dick Cavett show as he's interviewing Zsa Zsa Gabor. Mr. Cavett morphs into a talk show terror and slices at Goofy Gabor. Jennifer tries the dad approach to fixing a bung telly and gives it a smack, but that only worsens the problem, resulting in one of the most famous Freddy kills with an added improvised line from none other than Robert Englund.
The prime time, bitch!
Fun fact, the brand pin on that telly actually says Krueger. There you go. Morpheus comes running in and sees that he's lost another crew member to fight the machines in Zion. We cut to Jennifer's funeral where Dr. Gordon is confronted by that mysterious nun who introduces herself as Sister Mary Helena. Nancy heads over to see what Neil Nation is going on, but as he turns back, the sister has done the old Christian Bale. Later that night, with Neil feeling defeated, Nancy convinces the doc that it's time to inform him and the rest of the crew about Freddy's backstory. In the next group session, Nancy goes on to explain her history with Mr. Filthy Crispy, essentially telling the kids that they are the last children of Elm Street.
You are the last of the Elm Street children.
Interesting that Dream Warriors doesn't follow exact year continuity, even though the film was made in 1986/1987. Nancy explains that the events of Elm Street 1 took place 6 years ago, with Elm Street 2's events taking place 5 years after the original film.
You did it the other night.
What? Nancy convinces the crew that they all possess special dream powers and that Kristen is the key to unlocking them.
You sound like Peter Pan.
Dude, you are so thirsty for her. Stop it! Neil attempts to get the dream crew to sleep, but when it seems like they've failed, everyone suddenly realizes they're in the dream world, accompanied with their own special abilities. And you bet it's cheesy as hell.
In my dreams, I'm beautiful and bad.
Meanwhile, horny old Joey wanders off following the nurse. She seduces him. Before you know it, the two are playing a good old-fashioned game of tongue hockey. Things get really heated when we see the nurse tongue-tie Joey to the bed, eventually forming into the dream deviant himself. Now, originally, the lady who played the nurse actually had scenes filmed wearing Robert Englund's Freddy prosthetics. And to say it looks disturbing is an understatement. And it also makes me question a lot of things, and what I'm into. Don't read into it. The shots were rightfully cut from the film, as the idea of Freddy with titties was just weird. Really weird. Now, the way this particular shot was filmed was by having the entire set on the wall, with actor Rodney Eastman strapped to the bed right side up. However, because of the long shooting times, he eventually passed out from his arms being raised for so long. Meanwhile, back in the therapy room, things start getting real kinky as Freddy turns up the heat and makes the walls of the room close in on our Dream Warriors. Not before Dr. Sims bursts in to find everyone all passed out, with Joey now in a coma fighting for life. With Philip and Jennifer dead and now Joey in a coma, Neil and Nancy are fired on the spot. But as Neil is carting his shit to the car, he spots a wild nun up in the bell bell tower. He follows her up there where we get a massive exposition dump as well as the explanation of Freddy's mythology, claiming that a young nun was accidentally locked in this abandoned wing and raped hundreds of times by the inmates, and when she was eventually found, she was with child.
It's a boy!
We cut back to Nancy, who's watching over Joey as he lays in a coma before Freddy sends a good old-fashioned chestogram. This effect was achieved by the effects crew making a false chest that was glued to actor Rodney Eastman, and then using stop motion, they removed each blade swipe bit by bit to create the final chess message. Or chessage? With Nancy and Neil finally realizing that they have to put a stop to Krueger once and for all, they go to the original source of the problem. Nancy's father, Donald Thompson, now demoted to a security guard from police lieutenant. Donnie now spends his days staring down the bottom of a beer glass after the events of Elm Street 1 and losing his ex-wife in the process. But N-Squared need to know where Fred's bones were buried as they come up with a plan to smother the remains in holy water. It all seems useless as Dono doesn't want a bar of them. He just wants his bar. Nancy calls to check in on the kids when Taryn tells her that Kristen has been locked in the quiet room. Nancy bails back to the hospital whilst Neil then goes back and confronts Sookie Saxon, which I've got to give him props for. Bailing solid Saxon up against a wall takes balls, man. Whilst Nancy heads back to the hospital, Neil and Papa Thompson stop by the local church to swipe some holy water and a crucifix that ends with a pretty funny exchange between Neil and the priest.
I'll reimburse you. Here, you can keep my driver's license. I'll be back.
Nancy confronts Morpheus about if Kristen took the red pill or the blue pill, and he reluctantly lets her in to see the kids as they gear up to stop Quasi Krugs. Neil and Donnie arrive at the junkyard where Daddy-O informs the doctor that Fred's bones are hidden in the trunk of an old Cadillac. Back at the hospital, Nancy and the kids finally manage to go under and are reunited with Kristen, but the walls then start bleeding feathers as a cranky Kruger is awoken and Kristen is now back in her old bedroom with a drunken mother Elaine coming to tuck her into bed. She's then dragged away by her crispy date who decapitates her with a stab to the neck. Okay. I don't know why, but the idea of Freddy in a tux just blew my mind when I was a kid. I still remember seeing the old Freddy's Nightmare VHSs back in the day with that photo of him in a tux on the front. I'm just thinking, what? Also, you can see the glove doesn't even stab the wall. Fred just gives it a good old solid punch. We then cut to Taryn, who's up next on the chopping block in a creative and painful to watch kill. Freddy preying on her drug addiction, little suckers appear on her arms as Freddy injects her with a lethal overdose. Now, this wasn't the original look for Taryn's death. There was indeed a dummy head of Jennifer Rubin made where her eyes would explode whilst being injected. But as you can see in this BTS footage, it didn't quite work out. Also, props to the sound mixer for not even bothering to modulate Robert's voice here.
Why should we fight? We're old friends, you and I.
And as you can see right here, the index blade on the stunt glove had snapped off during this take. Now that Taryn is out of the picture, it's Will's turn. This time, he receives the wheelchair from hell. But Will fights back and takes on Freddy as the Wizard Master. And once again, we see some amazing voice modulation commentary.
You look tired. Have a seat.
Now, because Robert Englund was only needed in a dimly lit shot at the end of the hallway, he only needed to be in full Freddy costume and not the makeup. And in this behind the scenes home video, you can see him swigging a beer in between takes. Love it. Being the 80s, Robert was also no stranger to another certain substance, even apparently taking hits of it in full Freddy makeup. As Will meets his demise, a plank of wood was placed under Ira Heidman's costume, with Robert Englund wearing a retractable bladed glove. Rest in peace, the Wizard Master. Now, as a cheeky little bonus for this video, I was fortunate enough to have a chat with William R. Perry, aka Ira Heidman's stunt double for Elm Street 3 during the Wizard Master sequence, as well as doubling for Ira in Elvira, Mistress of the Dark. Alright, Bill, welcome to the channel. Thank you for your time, sir. What do you remember from that day of filming back in 1986 as the Wizard Master?
You know, the thing that I remember when they told me what it was gonna be, they said this wheelchair from hell is gonna be chasing you. And I remember thinking to myself, I looked at it and I looked at the wheelchair and I was kind of feeling the blades and the knives, and they were all primarily foam, you know, like foam core kind of stuff. And I thought, so what's the danger here? And they said, well, it weighs, you know, closer to 200 pounds. I said, oh, they said, and we're pulling it with a Volkswagen engine. And so they had wires that were attached to it, and then those wires would run down the hull, and then it was attached to a Volkswagen engine, and somebody would hit the gears, and then off it comes. When I saw it do it, it's like, oh, that doesn't look like that big a deal. And then when I got into the set, I realized that those wires are actually between my feet. And so when I'm running, I can't, trip, because I will get run over for real. And that wire was, it's actual steel cable. So that would have kind of cut a hole in me as well. But then they had said, well, we're going to want it to come by and hit you as well. So they brought it closer to the wall, and then they just pulled it this time with wires. They didn't need to use the motor. At the time, it was just a little bit of an adrenaline rush, because if it, there's always, anytime you're going to be on camera, there's a little bit of a rush, just because that everybody's watching. I remember working with Ira at the time, and when he found out, that it could really do some damage, he was like, yeah, you go ahead. But when we did the part where it hits me, he's got to land on the ground. And, this is something we usually do with the actor, is you'd show him exactly how you fell. It was a really good shoot. It was fun. The Nightmare movies were always very popular back then, and it was always something new. They would kind of show you some storyboards about what it was supposed to look like. And I just remember thinking, that's really cool. This is going to be a fun one. And now Ira and I have sort of reconnected after many years. And so we will, we'll talk about that. And when we were talking about hanging, by the wires, Ira said, that was me. And I said, hey, I got strung up too. And he's like, I think that's me. I'm pretty sure it's you. I didn't really get to hang out with Robert very much, because he's always in makeup. He's either in makeup, getting touched up in makeup, or getting out of makeup. And so you don't really spend much time with him unless you're actually shooting a scene with him. If he's not actually needed, he's sitting someplace and they're touching him up.
And because this was an age of when getting rid of wires wasn't exactly a thing and they were running out of money, here are some lovely wires. Kristen, Nancy, and Kincaid reunite before they're led down to a cavernous-looking boiler room that apparently was constantly being checked in on by the fire department, who kept threatening to shut production down if the set wasn't up to code. As the boys finally find Fred's bones, Freddy makes an entrance with a tongued-up Joey hanging over a fire pit.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
The trio save Joey just in the nick of time before Fred gets a hold of Kincaid, and Nancy puts one through him before Cruz gets all kinky and reveals just how he gets his power. The chest of souls. Once again, some unmodulated dialogue.
Always room for more.
It was at this point during production that director Chuck Russell was really rustling up the cast and crew, talking down to them and just being plain rude. It was Heather Langenkamp who stood up and pulled Russell aside and told him this is not how you treat your cast and crew, in true Nancy form. What a weapon. After the fiddling of some bones, Fred senses a disturbance in the force and fucks right off to the junkyard to take care of Neil and Donald during their boning session. In a throwback to Ray Harryhausen and Jason and the Argonauts, we see a stop motion / rear projection Skelly Fred come to life. He impales Donald on the rear fender of the Cadillac he was buried in. And that's irony at its finest. Fred then knocks Neil out with a shovel and makes a half-hearted attempt at burying him. After a primal scream, he then fucks right off back to some kid killing. The kids then find themselves in a hall of mirrors, and before you know it, a shit ton of Freds pop out to try and drag them in. It's all too much for Joey as he lets out a massive no that causes the mirrors to smash and release his friends. The mirror effect was achieved by Robert Englund standing in various spots accompanied with Mylar and some good old-fashioned optics.
Smashing!
In a touching moment, Nancy is reunited with Papa Thompson, who informs her that he's crossed over to the other side. They embrace, but Nancy is stabbed by that cheeky retractable glove. Old Krugs has pulled a swift one. Fred locks Joey and Kincaid out. Kristen takes on Bernie but is overpowered. Nancy, with her last ounce of strength, has her one last hurrah and stabs Freddy with his own glove. Neil comes to and begins to start throwing holy water on Fred's remains as we see it affecting the crispy one back in the dream world. Freddy erupts into a holy explosion. The boys finally manage to break in, but it's too late. Our final girl is no more. Nancy dies in Kristen's arms. Yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie, this scene still gets to me. I think it's how convincing Patricia Arquette is as she embraces a dying Nancy in her arms, and it's just heartbreaking, man. At Nancy's funeral, Neil is lured away once again by that mysterious nun. He stumbles upon her gravesite, and it's revealed that not only was she a ghost the whole time, she was indeed Amanda Kruger, Freddy's mum. Later that night, we see Neil all tucked in like a little 4-year-old with a now completed 1428 popsicle stick house and a Malaysian dream doll accompanied. And in a final nod to the audience, a little light flickers on and we cut to credits accompanied by Dokken's Dream Warriors.
A small independent film has swept the weekend box office grosses.
The #1 movie in the country last week. In Syracuse, they called in the mounted police to control the crowds at theaters.
Opening in just over 1,300 theaters and debuting at #1 with a weekend gross of $8.9 million, a record for an independent film at the time, Elm Street 3 made over $44 million of the domestic box office, making it both the highest grossing film for the studio that year and the 24th highest grossing film of 1987. Now, I only just learnt this, but upon the film's release, it was banned here in Queensland due to its depiction of drug use with Tarrant's death. The ban was eventually lifted in 1990. Fuck, we're sooks. Nightmare 3 to me is that perfect balance of what I call final form Freddy. It has the dark side whilst also injecting elements of dark humor and wit, and it never overstays its welcome. The cast of kids in this one are beyond believable, and you buy into their friendship. Its teamwork makes the dream work at its finest. See what I did there? The kills stretch beyond the imagination and at times just make you cringe with how ingenious some of the effects work was. These days, Elm Street 3 is regarded as one of, if not the best installments in the Elm Street series, and 1 year later we will get the MTV peak side of Freddy, before his inevitable transformation into a full-blown off-his-fucking-rocker Looney Tune. But that's gonna have to wait until the next installment of Behind the Reel, where we take a look at A Nightmare on Elm Street for the Dream Master. Guys, thank you so much as always for watching, love your guts, and I'll catch you in the next one.